Welcome to Base Layers, episode 3.
Episode 3. I was going to let you do the intro because I frankly really like your accent when speaking in English. Have we come up with any sort of tagline or introduction or standard verbiage that we open the show with? I don't know.
Not yet.
Not yet. So this is here's the show where Printer and I BS about Bitcoin-related things and talk about 3D printing and computer-aided design, and we usually walk through one of our designs for anybody who is maybe new to design or just likes to geek out on watching other people design things. And yeah, welcome.
All right.
So I recently returned from a trip to Europe and got to attend BTC Prague. And then I brought my older son with me to Europe. And after Prague, we went to a couple of other cities in Europe. And it was his first trip. I tweeted about this. It was his first trip on an airplane ever. His first, obviously, international trip, and it was actually his first Bitcoin conference. His dad has been a little bit negligent in that regard, so it was his first Bitcoin event. So a lot going on, but it was a great experience. Have you been to any of the previous Prague conferences?
No, unfortunately not. If I recall correct, there only was last year. Last year was it the first? I think so.
No, they claim to be the oldest Bitcoin conference.
Oh, shame on me! I didn't know.
I think the first one, if it wasn't in 2010, it was in 2011. They claim to be maybe it was 2011 is the first. Anyhow, very old, like 12 years and running kind of a thing.
Sorry, BTC Prague. No, I really didn't know. They were nice enough to ask me if I wanted to come last year, but it was on the same date as my wedding, and that wouldn't have ended well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, unless your bride is like really into Bitcoin.
I mean, she is, but not enough to let the wedding go.
Not enough to want to, say, get married at BTC Prague.
That would have been something.
That would have been something. But no, it was a great experience getting to meet some new Bitcoiners that I hadn't gotten to meet yet, and to connect with people that you see if you go to multiple conferences. You tend to see the same people again and again, and it was great to connect with other Bitcoiners that I consider kindred spirits. And it's a 4-day conference, at least it was this year. They have a dev/hack day, which is the first day, then it's pretty standard for several of the bigger conferences. Then they have an industry day, and then they have a 2-day main conference program. And we went for the dev day, and we went for the industry day, and then we went for one of the 2 main conference days, and then we elected to skip town and head west to Munich.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know how much storytelling we want to get into. I did get to have an amazing dinner with Richard, who is Surface Plasmin on Twitter. I don't know if he's the same thing on Nostr. But he was very gracious the first night we were there, and he wasn't going to be able to make it to any of the conference events, but he invited my son and I out to dinner at a great Czech restaurant that he had picked out, and had what my son describes as his favorite meal the entire time he was in Europe.
What was it?
They have, I'm not going to be able to name the dish right, but it's some sort of pork, almost, is schnitzel where they flatten the pork and then fry it? Is that?
Wiener Schnitzel.
Yeah, so it was some sort of schnitzel thing, but it had, I believe, cheese mixed in with it as well. And it was,
okay.
Richard said it was a favorite there, and kids usually love it too. And yeah, that was a great experience. And he shared some of his, he makes brandy out of plums. He makes it himself, the fermentation and the distilling process. And he gave me a bottle of his brandy that we've been joking and talking about it for a few years. So I immensely appreciated his hospitality, and as at a point where I've been trying to step down my alcohol consumption, yeah.
Yeah, but brandy is okay sometimes.
Yeah, it's nice a little bit before bed. So at your suggestion, we rode a Flixbus from Prague to Munich, and I decided to do it overnight, which not the best night's rest that you're going to get, but it wasn't too bad. I probably got a decent amount of sleep, and we arrived in Munich not realizing that I think it's the UEFA annual every 4-year tournament, which is the soccer, this all-European soccer tournament that is put on every 4 years. And this particular year, it was being hosted in Germany, and Munich was one of the host cities. So, like, everywhere we went, there were football fans. As soon as we got off the Flixbus at like 5:30 in the morning, and we were going to go to the hotel where we had a reservation for later that afternoon, and just see if we could leave our stuff there while we went out and explored some of Munich. And so we had to figure out how to get onto a local tram that took us to the underground train station that would get us close to the hotel. Anyhow, as we're waiting for the tram, and I'm trying to figure out the German transit system and what the platforms look like and what the signage looks like, and we thought we were waiting for the right tram, and this is at 6 in the morning. We're waiting for the tram. I think I'm in the right place, and this dude walks up to us at 6 in the morning. And I, with my background in law enforcement, I am suspicious of everyone and everything at all times, especially when I'm in a foreign country. And this guy walks up, and he's asking to use my phone because he's lost his phone. And he wants to log in to find my iPhone to see if he can, make his phone make a sound or, get a better location on it. And I'm like, he probably could tell that I was just like, I'm traveling with my kid. As soon as I open my mouth, it becomes obvious that I'm not a European. And after we talked with him for 30 seconds, it became very obvious how completely drunk he was. And he was wearing a kilt. He had a Scottish accent, and I didn't realize that the soccer tournament was partly being hosted in Munich. But as soon as I realized how crazy drunk he was, I let my guard down a little bit. So my son and I helped Thomas, who I believe had traveled from Scotland, locate his iPhone, which was in the bushes 2 blocks over. Who knows how it had gotten there. Hopefully Thomas made it home okay, was able to either hop on a tram or stumble back to wherever he was sleeping for the night. But
he was probably sleeping in that bush. That's where he lost that phone.
It fell out of his pocket when he was first drifting off.
Yes, in case you don't know, Germans and also Austrians are very, very crazy about soccer. Like, absolutely crazy. And on top of that, it's festival and concert season, so everyone's a bit more funny than they are for the rest of the year. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. But it was so
Austria
neat
is playing tonight, so yeah.
Who is playing?
Austria.
Oh. So I don't even know.
My team.
I haven't been following what stage of the bracket play they're at, if they're in, like, Final Four yet or finals or whatever. I saw that.
We're at the quarters.
I think I saw that Switzerland had knocked out Italy, and that was, I think, an upset. But now they're at the quarters. I need to I need to dig in. But it was super
absolutely
neat.
not a sports fan.
I will watch soccer, especially if it's at that level where I'd probably recognize some of the players. But it was really neat in Germany, as well as when we got to Switzerland, how every pub that had outdoor seating had brought in extra TVs. And in the evenings, it was just like the only thing anyone was doing was watching the game. It was for somebody who's in America, obviously everybody watches the Super Bowl, and when the World Series is on, everybody watches that. But as somebody who's more interested in soccer, we don't have quite as developed, though it's growing, quite as developed of a professional soccer league.
Okay.
So that was a neat experience. But I got to tell you that the train system in Germany just about broke my brain.
I can relate.
And it was probably me being thick more than anything. But it was like, Google Maps is integrated wonderfully with a lot of the train systems in Europe. And so all I need to do is open Google Maps and put in my phone where I want to go. And it will give you, as long as you select the public transit option, it will give you every step along the way that you need to take. But I was not familiar enough with the iconography in Google Maps to understand what was a train, what is a tram, and what is a bus. And so we got to one of the big stations in Munich, where it's just enormous. And we're trying to get to this castle that's about an hour and a half ride from Munich, called Neuenstein, or I'm probably butchering that. And there was probably 4 or 5 transit changes along the way. And we got to this big station, and I could not figure out whether we were trying to find a bus or a train. And we were kind of on a limited time frame in terms of, because you have to buy tickets to get into this castle at a specific time, and if you miss it, they're non-refundable, and blah, blah, blah. So I basically, after it became apparent to me that we were not going to get there in time using public transit, I used, I don't even remember what the app was, but it's an Uber equivalent that is probably more popular in Europe, and just was able to find, not for a crazy, I mean, it was way more expensive than it was going to be to ride the train, but a car that would drive us basically to the little town where the castles were. And it ended up being a fun experience because this guy liked to drive fast, and that my son got a kick out of that. And there were a few places on the freeway that didn't have a speed limit, and he was driving. For Americans, this is a little bit probably more of a thrill, but I think he was driving like 160 kilometers per hour, which I think is like 105, 110 miles per hour, which my son really got a kick out of that. And so anyhow, Munich, and then we went to Bern in Switzerland, and then we went to a little town in the foothills of the Swiss Alps called Grindelwald, and got to see the Jungfrau Joch, and it was a really neat experience, especially for my son, who's, he's 15, so he's impressionable and learning about the world and that kind of stuff.
I'm actually very jealous about that, and I have wanted to go to Grindelwald for quite some time, but never made it.
Is it like a somewhat well-known travel destination, or I'm curious, like what?
Yes, because of the glacier.
Oh, okay. And so I'm not. If somebody would have asked me if there were glaciers in Switzerland, I wouldn't have been able to have answered that question. But before having traveled there, being just kind of a dumb American with regard to travel. The views in Grindelwald. I was probably late on buying the hotel reservations or making the hotel reservations. And when I looked on hotels.com or Travelocity or whatever website it was, there was literally only one room available for the 3 nights that we were planning on being in Grindelwald available. So it was like, it wasn't out of my price range. So I just clicked buy. And I feel like I got totally lucky with that. The room we had was overlooking a couple of the Eiger face, and a couple of the more well-known. It was just an amazing view out of the balcony from the room, and not every room faces in a great direction for views and stuff. And so it was to just sit out there. Even it was just a thrill being able to be in that. It's like for Americans, if you can imagine being inside of the movie The Sound of Music, like in the mountains and everything, that's the experience. Because in America, in the mountains, we have the Rocky Mountains and to some degree the Appalachian, but most people think of the Rocky Mountains. And the places I've been in Colorado, it's just it's not as green. It's more, the natural landscape is more brown. And when you're in the Alps, it's just like especially in, June, everything is exploding green and very, very beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine that this, especially seeing this for the first time in person, is quite the experience. I'm blessed in that regard because I live in Austria and I just drive 30 minutes to mountains if I want to. But when I'm driving to Styria and passing the road between the Großglockner, which is our highest mountain, with 3,000 something meters, and its neighbor, which is almost the same, it's always breathtaking every single time. I've been there about 30 times minimum, and I always have to stop and just stand there and look at the mountains and breathe. It's very, I don't know, filling me with energy every time I'm there.
Yeah, there's this just natural sense of awe. Do you ski?
I did years ago, but then I hurt my knee very badly. And so I've refrained from skiing now because it has become hard to steer.
Now my son's, his probably like mission is to make it back to Switzerland sometime during ski season, because he is, of my three kids, he is like, when we go skiing, he is the first one on the mountain and he's the last one off the mountain, and he doesn't really take any breaks. He is really excited when he gets the opportunity to ski. And it's only having been there during the summertime, it's kind of difficult to imagine like what it's like and how it works, because it seems like at least in Switzerland, it's almost like skiing is more integrated into the national transportation system. Like in America,
Absolutely.
It's like there's a private company that owns the mountain, and they, invest money in building a system of lifts that get you to different places on the mountain. But in Switzerland, it's like they use these lifts and trains for transport throughout the year, and so skiing is just like a different season of that almost.
Yeah, that's Switzerland has solved this better. It's also more privatized here in Austria, so the same as you're describing. But in Switzerland, you can literally in some hotels like ski from the mountain all the way to the hotel gate. So that must be something very special.
In America, you have to pay a lot extra for that to be able to stay like on the mountain with ski in, ski out.
Yes, skiing has become one of those things that have really picked up with inflation now. So prices have been outrageous here.
Oh, really? So we've only been to Colorado to ski once, and other than that, it's kind of these, almost like redneck skiing experiences in the Midwest. Like we've been to Michigan once or twice, and we usually go to a place in Wisconsin where anybody who's been to, any place in Wyoming or Utah or Colorado kind of would scoff at it. But for kids and family skiing, it's much, when you're taking an entire family skiing, things add up quickly. So, yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
So what else has been going on in the Bitcoin space lately? You've been extremely generous helping me with, in my Lightning journey, all of the service closures here in the States with Phoenix ceasing operations in the U.S. and previous to that, Wallet of Satoshi backing out, and then some of the other services becoming less available here in the U.S. That gave me the kick in the butt that I needed to add Lightning to the stack on my personal node, and that has been a journey, to say the least.
Yeah, quite the journey. You're absolutely right. I'm always happy to help. This made me remember that it wasn't all that easy to start out when you're not used to doing that. I've become so accustomed to my node.
So, if how your current Lightning installation with your channels, like that installation, how long has that been up and running perpetually with, channels closed sometimes and you cycle in and out of them, but how long has that instance been up and running for you?
Up and running since when? Since inception, or just the uptime since the last restart?
No, inception. Like everybody has downtime for updates, I imagine, and stuff like that.
2.5 years.
2.5 years. That is.
Yeah, I think I started this one in the middle of 2022, so yeah.
That gives me hope. That gives me hope that once I get things up and running, it'll be there for a while.
Oh yeah, it will. It's very stable once you get it to run, and once everything does what you want it to do.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to finally get BTC Pay up and running, to be able to offer some of the items in my fiat store in a Bitcoin payment environment, and to be able to, like you already do, offer some of my designs for sale out there, just as a way of, I think it's a win-win if people can, pay a relatively small amount for something that they can print and enjoy themselves.
Absolutely. You can recoup some of the design time you've put into, and if people really want to print it at home, and luckily there are many DIY people with 3D printers now, I think that's a very valid option, and the file seller plugin from BTC Pay Server makes it really easy.
Yeah, so. there are even some things that I've put significant design time into that I've never listed for sale in my store. Two things I can think of are like my own personal design of like a block mitt type stamping solution for stamping washers, seed words into washers. Yeah. I put a fair amount of time into one that prints beautifully in TPU, and I've just never, I don't know, there's always something to do, and sometimes the things don't make it into the store. And then you've printed it. There's a Bitcoin medallion with a chain that all prints as one piece. That I was really disappointed with the filament. And it's not even the filament; it's the bamboo slicer. How it rendered the top layer just did not. Aesthetically, you have this filament that's very reflective, and so transitions in the printing process always show a little bit more when it stops in one area and goes to another. The way that it rendered it just was frustrating to me.
Absolutely. As you said, I've tried it with many different settings for top layer infill and whatever. Changed a lot, and it was always the same. That must be some problem with Bamboo Slicer or Bamboo Studio, because it's always filling the top layer, not in a way that just leaves this very ugly diagonal mark.
Mm-hmm. And you would think that would be something that would be eventually coming on their radar, that they would have an option for, I don't know what you would call it, like clean top layer or whatever, but not yet.
Yeah, maybe I can sell you Prusa XL. It did that beautifully.
Really? I would.
Yeah, I think
at some point I would love to see a picture of how it turned out. Did you already?
I think I shared them with you a few months. Months ago.
I must be forgetting or something.
I'll see if I can find them.
It's tough to. But I need a lot of reasons to drop the kind of money into a Prusa XL. that it
Yeah,
requires
sure.
for one of those, but that could be one of them.
I'll just ship one to you, and then you can see for yourself.
I'll take you up on it. So I guess speaking of designing and printing, we should probably jump into the design portion of what we're doing here.
Let's go.
Let's see. So this is the part where I awkwardly remember how to share my screen.
Then we wait for the infinite recursion.
That's my favorite part. Share screen. And we are going to... Oh, duh. All right. I'm not so smart. Here we go. Recursion, and then, are you seeing the design now?
Yes.
Perfect. This design, I have a pegboard organization system in my workshop area where if you don't have some sort of shelving or pegboard solution, it can be like keeping things organized can very quickly get entirely out of hand because you're limited by the amount of horizontal space you have. And if you have a lot of, prototypes you're working on, or if you're running a store and you have inventory that you're trying to organize or tools that you want to keep out of the way, going to some sort of vertical organization system is a huge space saver. So what I have here is just a simple bin that you would put maybe screws in or, any sort of thing that would fit in the bin. And you can, once you have the design set, you can print as many as you need and put them all over the place once you get the pegboard up. So I'm going to go through this design, but before I do, I just want to note that this sort of design is highly modular. Once you figure out the correct spacing and sizing for these pegs that hook into the pegboard system, you can design not just different sizes and shapes of bins, but I have all sorts of different shelves and hangers to hang tools on, and virtually anything that you want to try to get off of, a table surface or a shelf, you can design something with these peg systems to be able to get it onto the wall. So with that said, you guys can see the finished object, and I am going to jump backward through the design timeline now to show you how we got to that point. And this is not, as you can see from my design timeline, there's maybe like a dozen steps here. So this is not a super labor-intensive design that people who are maybe less experienced can start with. Like I said, once you get the dimensions dialed in, which I'll share as I'm able to going through this, once you get those dimensions dialed in, there's a very modular design that you can use to design and build really whatever you want. So as with everything, we start with a sketch. These particular dimensions are not important because they're just going to dictate the overall size of the bin that we're building. So we do the sketch, and then I do an extrude to pull that up. And for this particular design approach, I've just created the foundation for that bin. And then the next sketch is going to be what I would call the back plate for the bin. So that is just drawing this little rectangular section. And I will point out the reason I chose 4 millimeters, I believe that's going to dictate the thickness of the walls of the little bin. It may or may not. We're going to step through this design, and it's partly a process of me remembering how I design things. But after that, I've extruded that face up. Wait, everything's going awry. So that's a remnant from a different design, because like I said, this is modular and I've done it then. So I actually didn't use that sketch at all. I just went straight from this flat thing to extruding a box.
Nothing.
So this is about as simple as 3D CAD design gets, to draw a square and extrude it in a couple dimensions. Now we should be getting into the more interesting stuff with the design. So, oh gosh. So with this particular sketch, let's jump into it. And this is probably the most important step. And there's a few things to highlight here. So the first thing is the distance between, I believe this is standardized across pegboards, but obviously you have to have the pegs spaced at a very specific spacing. And both vertically and horizontally, it's the same amount. In the metric system, I can't quote what it is in imperial, but in the metric system, it is 50.8 millimeters. And that is center to center, the distance between the holes in the pegboard that you're going to have to design for to get your hooks and pegs to be located in the correct places for that to work. So if you take 50.8, divide that in half, you get this 25.4. So what I've done in this particular sketch is I went to the back of this cube sort of shape, and I found the center line, and that from that center line, I'm measuring out 25.4 millimeters in either direction, so that cumulatively from the center of this hexagon to the center of this hexagon, I'll have that 50.8 millimeter measurement too. Notice I've also measured that out vertically, so from like this hexagon on the right, directly down, that's that same 50.8 measurement. And now, with that said, your mileage may vary on the sizing that you choose for the pegs. I chose, you could do circles, but I chose hexagons because hexagons tend to print more easily. And what I chose was a radius from center to exterior angle of 3 millimeters. So from this point to this point, that's obviously going to be 6 millimeters. And one thing that I will point out, let's draw a sample hexagon just for people who, this was something that I didn't realize until I had gone a little bit further in my design journey. But there's two options to design shapes that are very apparent in the menu system. There's a circumscribed polygon, which means that, let's go ahead and just pick one. I'm going to choose, and we'll delete these once we're done with them, but I'm going to pick the center line of this construction line over here. And now you can see as I move it around that, let's say I dial in that same 3 millimeters as the radius. When I select that and I draw it, 3 millimeters is, instead of this one where 3 millimeters is from the center to the apex of one of the angles on the outside, instead 3 millimeters is from the center to the midpoint of one of the sides of the polygon. And this is of course going to result in a larger shaped hexagon than what the one above is. But the point is, a total in diameter of 6 millimeters is about the size that I chose to, that fits reasonably well inside of one of the peg bolts. I'm assuming the peg boards are standard and that the diameter of the holes in them is roughly standard. But depending on your printing setup or your pegboard, you may find that you're going to have to choose a little bit smaller or maybe even a little bit larger dimension. If I had to design this again, I would probably go a little bit smaller because that 3 millimeter diameter ends up being a little bit snug in my pegboard, but it's worked just fine. But if I was going to revise anything, I might take that down to like 2.9 millimeters or something, just to allow for a little bit more, because I found that the drilling of the holes on the pegboards isn't entirely consistent or uniform. And every once in a while, you'll find a hole that has been drilled slightly less thoroughly, I guess you might say, where it's difficult to fit something that fits in most of the other holes just fine.
And
the
also
other thing I will point out. Go ahead.
Also, you have to account for material expansion, because when we design for something to have a 3 millimeter diameter, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will have when it's printed. So it's probably closer to 3.1 or 3.2 when it comes out.
Depending on the material you're using. And depending on what I've found sometimes is that when, for whatever reason, if you choose or have an object that has at 100% or close to 100% of infill, just by virtue of expansion, have you found sometimes those will end up being larger than an object that's printed with, some degree of sparse infill?
Not that I would have noticed, but I also learned the hard way to always account for material expansion, and I'm generally always leaving a bit of tolerance room, like 0.1 millimeters.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that's depending on the printer too.
And some of these are fine distinctions that people may not even encounter. But what else I will point out about how I've drawn this hexagon is that when I set the second point for the hexagon, you'll notice that it's not entirely level. And this is not something I realized when I first started designing, is that specifying, depending on what angle you're shooting for, sometimes it matters the direction where you finalize the shape.
Yes, absolutely.
So if you're careless and you don't, ensure that this is a 90-degree angle, subsequently in the design, where I've run into the most problems with it, is that subsequently in your design, you will find that something is slightly off of square that causes, a host of other cascading problems. And sometimes I'm able to trace it back to a shape that I've drawn that results in an extrusion that's not square. And so it's just a suggestion I make, is to be very careful about where you place those endpoints. And sometimes you might even just draw a guideline that you can outright specify as 180 degrees and then say I'll make it 3. And so I use this sketch line as a kind of guideline for then drawing the polygon itself. So I find that point again, and then you notice it'll just snap into that. And I've created that as a sketch polygon, so it's a little bit more difficult to see. I don't want to belabor this issue too much, but this was something in my design journey that solved some problems for me that I didn't realize I had been imprecise about. So if you'll notice, this one's slightly off kilter, but this one's square with the line. Just a minor detail, but something I'd point out for people. Since we're not extruding those, I don't even need to delete them. I think I've covered everything that needs to be covered here. Obviously, the point is that whenever I measure any 2 points, and it doesn't have to be center points, but if I click I on my keyboard for measure, and I go from this point to this corresponding point, fingers crossed, it should always come up as that 50.8 number. Whether it's a side-to-side measurement, or whether it's, let's say, from this angle to that angle, it's always that 50.8. And sometimes when I draw things, I'll just measure them just to confirm that things are as square as I expect them to be, that I didn't make any sort of angle or point placement error as I was drawing, because those things can cause headaches down the road. So hopefully I haven't belabored that too much, but on the back of this box, I have drawn the hexagon or hexagonal shapes that I'm then going to extrude. to make the mechanisms that hook into the pegboard. But before I do that, we have to, these up at the top are going to be hooks, as you saw in the original design. These will be just pegs that come straight out, but these will be hooks that come out and then go up. So to be able to do that extrusion, I need some kind of track to use the, let's see, it's going to be a sweep function. So I need a track for the sweep function to follow. So what I do first is create a mid-plane for the box itself, and then I'm going to create another offset plane, pardon me, from the mid-plane that if we look at the specifications for this offset plane, it is 25.4 millimeters off of the center line. So it's basically the exact same thing that I did in the sketch over here. It's that same measure of 25.4, but this is to create an offset plane that I can draw another sketch on that creates a path for those hooks. So hopefully this, for anybody who's watching and following along, this makes more sense. So if I jump into this sketch, I've created this sketch on that offset plane that aligns with the center of the hexagon. And your mileage may vary on the length of these lines and radii. But what I found was 8 millimeters out, 8 millimeters up made the most sense with a 4 millimeter radius on that curve. And down here, I probably just went out 8 millimeters for that straight peg. But when I go to extrude the hexagon, as you'll see in the next step, this is going to give that hexagonal shape a path to travel along. And so for the next step, how can I surprise myself here? I created another offset plane that is on the other side, and I don't think this was actually necessary, but before I realized that, I created another offset plane that if we look at that, it's that same half of 50.8, which is 25.4 in the other direction. And I drew that same shape over there, and I don't think that was necessary, because when I go to extrude these, you can actually, and let's take a step back and make sure that people understand that it's these shapes that are being extruded. But when I set this extrude up,
it did let you extrude both at the same time.
Yeah, you just pick one of the paths. So you select both of the hexagons that you want to extrude, but because the path is basically identical, I didn't need to draw that other sketch over there.
It's because the path is also still in the ultimate width of the container itself. So if it would have been outside, it wouldn't have let you, obviously. But
right.
Like this, you could have gotten away with just drawing it on the midplane.
Yeah, and the midplane too would have worked, absolutely. Because really the whole point is just how far out, what kind of turn, and then how does it go up. And you'll see, if I want to, this would never fit in the pegboard, but if I want to select another one of these, it's going to be exaggerated and all wrong because it's following the same path that this one is, but it's at, a different offset from that path. So that looks totally ugly, and we don't want to do that because it wouldn't work. But anyhow, that first, again, it's a sweep along a path is the function that you'll choose, and that's how we get the curve out and up for those hooks. Next, it's even simpler. You wouldn't even need to draw a sketch for that necessarily. You would just do a create extrude. You could select these two hexagons that we drew on the back surface of that, and just extrude those out. I believe it was 8 millimeters. And that will give you the pegs that will then lock the bin into the pegboard. And after that, I added a chamfer to the front, and I will explain why. Because, as we've talked about before, I'm sometimes a sucker for designing things in such a way that they can print without any supports.
Mm-hmm.
And so my thinking was, if I printed this object once I hollow it out and make it into a bin, if I print it as it is, these technically should have supports. I've actually found that at least I've tried it with a bamboo machine, and it will, because the 8 millimeters is such a relatively short distance away from the object, it will actually print those fairly well without supports, but they end up being a little bit malformed and ugly, and it's just imprecise. So if you were going to print this bin in this orientation, with the bottom on the print bed, you would want to have some kind of temporary support structure for those so that they breakaway supports so that it turns out pretty. But it would also be kind of neat to have on this particular bin a kind of a scoop front, so that, because if you've ever tried to grab screws out of a bin like this or something, small objects can get caught in the bottom and the front, and you end up trying to dig them out. So if I added a scoop to the front of it, that makes it easier to pull small things out of a bin like this. And if instead of printing on this bottom surface, if I oriented the print to print on this front angle, then it constructs these rear hooks to go into the pegboard. It positions those at such an angle that that they no longer need supports, which again is just kind of one of these OCD things where we like to try to print things without supports because it wastes material, yada yada yada. So adding that chamfer to the front, OCD. Adding that chamfer to the front not only eliminates, it improves the design of the bin, but it also eliminates the need for supports. I think I've probably belabored that enough. And then the last step is to do a modify a shell. So if I use that shell feature and just select the top face and then tell it how thick I want the walls to be, it hollows out the inside, and I could do some other things to pretty up this bin to make it more organic, or create, a wider bin or a taller bin or different dimensions or whatever. But this is a basic kind of building block system that you can use to design all sorts of little bins that are useful for a pegboard setup. And I think that's it. Do you have any observations, or did I miss anything?
I think that's the scoop or the chamfer was a really good idea. Not only for printing support free, because supports are just wasted material and supports are for noobs, and we don't like those. But another big thing is I'm not sure how close you stack them together, especially if you stack them above each other. The scoop will actually help you to reach in the one that's under this one. So if they're close together, stacked above each other, you'll have an easier time gripping or putting your hand into there.
Yeah, that's absolutely true too. I didn't even think of that. Yeah, so maybe when I get my BCP server up, one of the first files that I will put up for a buck or two is this design. But as anyone who's watching this and is trying to learn along, or who knows even just a little bit about Fusion, I'll go emphasize it one more time. But the most important thing is not that sketch, it's this sketch. And 25, or actually 50.8, half of that's 25.4, and then I found a 3mm radius to work for those. That's really the secret sauce to the whole design. Beyond that, you can, turn it into whatever you find useful.
And that's again one of those superpowers of 3D printing. You can just get your pegboard, make your measurements, and then make holders and fixtures for everything, literally everything. And it's just so nice to come into a workshop where all tools have their place.
Yeah, and that's and part of the nice thing is you can design things to suit your own needs, and you can scale your organization as you go. So if you find that you're using a new part for a new project or something, or you have a new tool that you didn't have before, like at any point, you can either revisit the design if you need to modify it, or if you just need another bin, you keep that STL in a folder and just slice it again, and off you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anything exciting in the upcoming week or two for you?
The upcoming week, not really much fiat stuff coming. Stuff with the house is in order because we're renovating, and yeah. But really in the Bitcoin space, I'm designing a lot of things right now, but unfortunately I can't really talk about them yet. Because they're either not done or just unannounced. But yeah,
but they will be announced at some point.
They will be announced at some point. So I'm just a worse Anthony Pompliano here. I'm doing the announcement of the announcement.
Right. I have. I don't think it's been officially announced, but I don't think it's an issue for me to share. So I have been, since I returned from Europe, in a production push for the aluminum SeedSigners, because they will be, it's everything's set up. They will be available in the conference store at the Nashville conference later this month. It is now, and so every day. For those who have built one of those aluminum signers, they understand that it's a little bit more labor-intensive process than building one of the 3D printed SeedSigners or anything. So myself and my son has been helping me too with the most laborious part, which is one by one placing the GPIO pins into the display hat so that you can solder them into place, which is the most rote, mind-numbing,
absolutely
boring part of it. That
finger
poking. I'm paying him some sats to take that pain from me and to get those. But I am thankfully. I think I'm at 80 of the. They've asked for 100, and I'm at 80 of the 100 signers, and I'm printing some other things to go along with it. But that is the big production push right now, and what I am.
The amount.
Excited to get to the finish line with, because it's it's an undertaking, and it's capital intensive too. As you and I both run these online stores, you have to have some discipline with your working capital. I have found it's a really important thing, and with all of the travel for Europe. And that was a great trip, and it's something, that I'll remember for the rest of my life with my son. But that was not, a cheap trip, and it depleted some of the fiat savings that I had built up, with the business. And so I am trying like hell not to sell any Bitcoin to be able to make sure I have everything I need to bring everything to Nashville. And it's like it's a balancing act, trying to,
Yeah, it can be quite the struggle. That's for real. If you dedicate your capital to the wrong places just once, that can hold you back for months.
And we've talked a little bit, like for me at least, over the last 2 months, as the Bitcoin price has stagnated a little bit and the hype has died down, like the sales, I have found that like of SeedSigners especially, the sales are most brisk or people are even building them on their own. That's the most brisk when the price of Bitcoin is going up and people are starting to get antsy about the amount of value that they're protecting and whether or not they've put the precautions in place. But as the price starts to level off and like drift down a little bit, people's mental energy goes more towards hopium and the resumption of the bull market rather than securing their stack. It's just a natural human.
That's one of the things. I think the coping with the fact that there's a dip when there's a dip, which is hurting sales or just disincentivizing people to spend assets. And on the other hand, I think it's just also the beginning of summer. It's getting warm. People are going out. Hopefully not looking into screens as much as they do in winter. So I think that plays a part too. But always. And the other thing is our customers, like us, Bitcoiners, are very opportunistic at times. And I too like to spend when I have to spend less sats for what I'm getting. So I can totally relate.
Yeah. I am, I'm on board with that too. It makes a lot of sense. One question, were you planning on going to Lugano, the conference in
Yes,
maybe?
I will be in Lugano for sure. I have almost booked the hotel. I have got the confirmation from the conference, so that's for sure now. Looking forward to being there again. Probably in the same place where I was last year for the people who know where I was. It's just in the art gallery in the most upper floor.
Yeah. No, I think some of the conferences are waking up to the fact that some sort of DIY or makerspace or place for people to smaller projects or, even businesses for people to show off innovative things that they're doing is a win for, it's a win for the attendees. It's a win for the conference because it's something else interesting that people get to experience. Yeah. And it's a win for, smaller projects, smaller companies that may not be able to, the booth price at some of these bigger conferences is a really big hurdle for people who, may not be selling items that are super expensive or that have great margins. So it's definitely a win-win. What month is that conference in?
At the end of October, so from the 25th to 27th of October.
And is it what? I'm embarrassed to say I don't even know what part of Switzerland Lugano is in. Is it north, south?
The south, the absolute south of Switzerland in the Italian part.
Is it near Lake Geneva too, I guess, or?
Not.
No, so it's
probably more than Bern, but not really.
Okay,
I'm
so
also
southeast, is that? I should just pull up a map.
Pull up yeah, exactly. Before I just tell you something absolutely ridiculous here.
Yeah. Here we are, Lugano. This is. Yeah, it's like southeast.
Yeah.
My Swiss geography is off. I always think of Lake Geneva as being in the southern part of the country, but it's actually like far southwest. So yeah.
Also, Lugano is really, really close to the Italian border, like a 20-minute drive, and you're over in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, looking forward to this one. Lugano was a blast last year, absolutely, and I think they have done a really good job with separating the conference into the talking parts and the big conference booths, which are all down there, and then this art gallery, which is kind of in a separate building next to the menu. and it has been a nice experience last year. So
yeah, I've heard it's
yeah.
a great event, so I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I hope so too.
All right. Well, unless there is something else that you want to talk about, and if there is, please broach it. But I guess that's all we have.
That's all we have for today.
So episode 3. Are we getting any better?
I don't know. I think we talked over each other a bit less this time, maybe.
Yeah.
So
the verbal cues are getting better.
We're still both very much unprepared. So I promise I'll work on that.
Well, we talked about it is difficult to read verbal cues of a Cthulhu without any sort of eyeball cues or mouth cues or yeah. So I'm working through it, though. I'm sure I'm going to get better and better.
No, I think that's really that one's on me. So I think you can tell when I'm laughing here, like. But that's everything. Yeah, I have to get another mask or a different mask or some other cloaking device because I'm quite frankly dying from heat.
I'll let you escape the.
My brain is constantly overheating. Please shut down.
Okay. Well, for anyone who's made it this far, thank you so much for listening. If you have suggestions or feedback, we always have open ears for that. And if you've made it this far, thank you. And we'll keep doing this until the internet tells us to stop.
Yeah. Or until we get better eventually.
Oh, and like and subscribe. Don't you have to say that at the end? Like and subscribe?
Yes, like and subscribe for the algorithm or something.
Yeah. For the algorithm.
Bye.
All right.